You were reflecting on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and you explain how the rise of scientism and the sexual liberation came together. And that's not something I thought about. Everyone thinks about Frankenstein and what he's saying about technology, but the whole other half of the book and how it pertains to women, I like, how had I missed that? And you explicate it so well, and showing how those two things come together in the book to reveal a joint war on women that attempts to emancipate us from the meaning and the function and the poetry of our own bodies. So while we have a chance with you, talking with you, what advice do you have for us as women who want to recover and honor the truth and beauty of the feminine in this particular cultural moment?
It's a really tough thing to do, because not only have feminists taken over the narrative. The left is very good at this. They're very good at basically putting forward an idea, spotting a problem, putting forward a solution, and then if you disagree with the solution, calling you names. So that, in other words, they'll say, well, women's field of action has been restricted. And my point in the chapter about Frankenstein is not that they were always restricted, but actually something happened. There was an industrial revolution. The things that made for the biblical idea of a woman who was an economic engine, a businesswoman, someone who planted vineyards and sold land and made clothes and did all these things while taking care of her family, vanished, because all those jobs became factory jobs, and even her children were taken away to the factories, never to return and take care of the farm anymore. And so that's when feminism starts to break into the world. And so this is a temporal thing. This is not a great philosophy. Women actually lost something, and feminism offered to give it to them back, and it lied. And it lied because the people who were interested in it were not the same people as most women. They were disgruntled, unhappy people. And Mary Shelley is this perfect example of this, because her mother is basically the first English feminist. She's the proto-feminist, Mary Wollstonecraft. Her father is also a devotee of what they called free love. And her husband, whom she worshipped, Percy Shelley, was her model, and he was a devotee of free love and really treated her quite shabbily, in my opinion, but not in hers. And she went on after he died to become a much more conservative person, and a person who did write books celebrating the domestic role of women and the religious role and spiritual role of women. So that's a long way of getting back to saying that you are surrounded by a cloud of unknowing, and this is a really powerful phenomenon that we don't talk about enough. And on the right, we usually call it a narrative. We say it's a narrative that shapes the way you think. To break out of that takes a lot of work, because even when you devote yourself to motherhood, which both I and C.S. Lewis consider the central task of humankind, everything else is built to support motherhood and to actually make that possible. When you devote yourself to that, you are taking yourself out of the world of rewards and celebration and fame and money. You are doing something sacrificial, and you're living into the meaning of your life, or rather you're living into the spirit of your life rather than into the flesh. That's a very difficult thing to do. It is always a sacrificial action. When anybody lives into the meaning of their life, it's a sacrificial action. When I say something that's going to get me thrown out of Hollywood and cost me millions of dollars, that's a sacrificial action. You do it because you're living into the meaning of something. It seems to me that the women who do this, who actually devote themselves to the meaning of their bodies and the meaning of their life as women, they seem to me to become much happier than the young women I meet who are swathed in feminism. I frequently, when I get up to give speeches in colleges, which I did a lot more before the pandemic than I've done since, but I would get up and say, it seems to me young women are miserable. And I'm not a young woman, so if I'm wrong, when I'm finished speaking, get up and say so. No one has ever gotten up and said I was wrong. Many times young women get up and say, no, we're miserable. We're really unhappy, and we don't know why, and we don't know how to fix it. And the only way to fix it is to break with the narrative. And this is an act of courage and an act of intellect that is incredibly difficult to do.